Hello and welcome to another Monday night Q&A. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Craig Hawkins from the assessment field team. Evening, Craig.
Good evening, Sam. How are you?
I'm very good. How's your Monday been so far?
Been a busy, sunny one, except the rain started now, so we've released the garden for today.
Yes, yeah, we've had the same thing here in that it's been nice and sunny, not too warm, but yeah, we've had the odd 5 minute downpour. But yeah, can't be complaining. It's still shorts and t-shirt time. Okay, just to explain a few simple house rules. As with all of our live Q&As, we start off with the question of the week that was posted out on social media earlier today, and we'll go through the answer to that question. I do have to say, when I had a quick look around the Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn polls earlier, everybody seemed to be getting it right, which is really good. And then while you're putting further questions in the chat for tonight's live event, we'll go through some of the questions that we didn't get round to from previous QA sessions. So please remember, post your questions in the chat. I can start to see them coming in already, which is really good. Remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. And please do remember in the chat to be respectful to each other, because the whole idea of this evening is that collectively we'll help each other with the aim of improving our collective knowledge and understanding of all things BS 7671 and the world of electrical installation. So, without any further ado, let's have a look at this week's question of the week. So, the question of the week was, what is the minimum cross-sectional area of a single insulated conductor used as a CPC, used as a circuit protective conductor, if it doesn't have mechanical protection and it's not within an enclosure? And the options that we gave people were 1.5 mil squared, 2.5 mil squared, 4 mil squared, or 6 mil squared. So what's our answer to that one, Craig?
So the answer for this one is C, 4 mil. And I really like this question because it gets people understanding the minimum requirements and some of the wording, especially in this question where it mentions no mechanical protection and it's not within the enclosure. So it's essentially a single insulated CPC on its own. It's not within a conductor, a cable, it's not within a trunking, it's not within a ducting or a conduit of some description. So 543.1.1, and there's indent 3, 4, and 5 there. And it stipulates if it's not part of it's not an integral part of the cable, it's not forming part of the conduit, ducting, or trunking system, and it's not contained within an enclosure forming part of the wiring system, it said it should be 2.5 mil squared equivalent if mechanical protection is offered, and 4 mil where it's not. So it's what we've got to look at here, and the rationale behind this is due to the mechanical strength nature of the conductor itself. And the larger it is, it's obviously more mechanical strength. So that's generally speaking the intent why we would expect it to be of that conductor size.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll show them the reg. So as you said quite rightly, 543.1.1, and it tells us if it's not part of an integral part of a cable, so it's not part of a multi-core cable, it's not formed by the conduit, ducting, or trunking of a wiring system, and it's not contained in an enclosure, then if it had mechanical protection it would be allowed to be a minimum of 2.5, but as you've said, if it doesn't, then it has to be 4 mil. We've had our guru who's looking after us in the background has said you're coming across a little bit faint, Craig. Is there any way that you can move a bit closer to your mic? Is your microphone on your head? All right, it's on your headset. So you can't really get much closer than that, can you?
It means feeling our settings.
So while you're doing that, I'll just also say, so that the last part of that reg talks about, we also should refer to 543.3.1, and that's a nice simple one, it's a short reg that says any protective conductor shall be suitably protected against mechanical and chemical deterioration and electrodynamic effects. So as you were saying, Craig, that's really the reason for that 4 mil, which might seem a little bit large for a CPC on a low current circuit, but a lot of it is due to the mechanical strength required, isn't it?
Yes. Just to test, is that any better? I'll continue with my train of thought, but hopefully the sound is a bit better on this one. So the example that I like to give for this is generally in the domestic market, where you might come across an older installation where a lighting circuit is lacking a CPC, a circuit protected conductor. And this is, a regulation to look out for if the option for that circuit is to provide it with separate CPC, and if so, and if it is on its own, not in part of the cable and not part of a conduit ducting trunking system, and it doesn't have mechanical protection, it's 4mm loop in, loop out, your light fittings. That would be a nice fun one for the contractors out there.
But that's a great example, isn't it? That we quite often, as you say, get that in particular in lighting installations where if we go back to the 80s and earlier, we didn't tend to run a CPC because we didn't see that there was a requirement. And now we then go to those installations that have still got the same wiring. We're perhaps installing a new light fitting that requires, it's a class 1 fitting, it needs a circuit protective conductor, and we find ourselves having to run a 4mm, which, as you say, that's difficult enough in itself, but then also to try and terminate it in a light fitting that's not expecting that. So yeah, sometimes that often causes that the circuit needs to be rewired or needs to be considered to be rewired, because that's perhaps a more practical solution than trying to get a 4mm conductor into those fittings. Okay, another one that's been that we're seeing quite often now due to things that have changed recently is should I be working to the latest corrigendum to BS 7671? Hopefully we're all aware that there was a corrigendum published or issued by the IET on the 15th of May, and if we just the answer, should I be working to that latest corrigendum? Well, if we're talking about new work that was started after that date, the 15th of May, then the answer is yes. And the reason for that is, if we actually look within the corrigendum itself, which you can freely download from the IET website, the corrigendum itself says it comes into it's intended for immediate implementation. So any new work started after the 15th of May should comply with the requirements of the corrigendum. Anything that was started before that, of course, could continue to be completed against the edition to which it was designed and installed, and then you would need to certificate it accordingly. So that's our response there. Any other thoughts on that corrigendum date, Craig?
No, I think the corrigendum was a welcome clarification around 7671 to some of the requirements within it, deletion of some of the items and clarification over certain things. So if you haven't read it already, it's only a few pages long. Make sure you're conversant with it out there in the world, because it's important that we're working towards it.
Yeah, it does make some changes, and particularly if you're in the protected escape route world or you're in the medical location world, it has some impact. And also it clarifies that unintended consequence associated with surge protection or protection against transient overvoltages for safety services. So yeah, well worth having a look. And we did do a wire webinar on it. If you've not watched that, it would be worth going back and having a watch of that as well. Another one that's been hanging around for a while is, does an electrician have to put a retest date sticker on the consumer unit after every retest showing the next date? So what's our thoughts around that, Craig?
So the answer for this is yes, because the requirements of the labelling falls under section 514, specifically 514.12.1. And it does state on there, an instruction notice of such durable material as to be likely to remain easily legible throughout the life of the installation shall be fixed in a prominent position at or near the relevant distribution board or boards upon completion of works carried out in accordance with chapter 64 and 65, 64 being for initial verification and 65 being for periodic inspection and testing.
So it's not necessarily on the consumer unit itself, but a prominent position at or near those relevant distribution boards and consumer units. And it does give a recommended date for the next inspection, which forms part of both initial verification, your intended interval to its first periodic inspection, and then the person conducting the condition report would determine the likely intended life of that installation and when it would be due for a retest.
Yeah, so it's useful information, isn't it? If it has been, as we hope it would be, updated correctly, it's good to be able to see when was it last tested, and then think to yourself about the things that have changed 7671 wise, which may impact then the outcome of your subsequent condition report or periodic inspection, which will be done to the current edition at the time when you're doing the inspection. So it's always good to see when it was last done, and that will give you an indication of what was the requirements around the installation practice then as well. Another question that we've had talks about, if a house has a three-phase supply, is it still considered domestic or is it classified as commercial? Nice simple answer to that one. It is still domestic. If it's a dwelling, it certainly falls within that, and then those parts of the regulations which refer to domestic installations would be applicable. Likewise, the competent person schemes. So, for example, the NIC domestic installer scheme would be still appropriate whether it was a three-phase supply or a single-phase supply to the domestic property. We're finding now that some of the DNOs are installing three-phase as standard due to the increased demand that the installations are having. In particular, we're seeing now the reduction of gas supplies, so we're having electric boilers, we're having electric heating, both hot water and central heating, also possibly EV charging. So all these things are increasing the electricity demand within the property. So as I say, we're seeing some DNOs now providing a three-phase supply as standard. Regardless of whether it's three-phase or single-phase, it would still come under the domestic. Some of the confusion might be due to some of our older domestic installation certificates referred to single-phase 100 amp supplies. So, but those have been removed now anyway. We no longer have a separate domestic domestic electrical installation certificate. We just have the one, and that again was one of the reasons behind it. Are you seeing three-phase supplies out there in new builds?
Yeah, I'm seeing it more and more often these days. Not so much on the small build estates, but on larger domestic properties that might only be single or very small amounts of properties on a large plot of land. We're seeing a lot of them are having, really because the use of air source heat pumps, EV charging, as you've mentioned, the electric boilers and such other electric cookers and heating, then there is a need to balance that load and make sure that we are not overloading the service equipment by having significantly large loads placed on our systems. And if you require three-phase, then it's something, especially on a new build, that it's becoming more and more apparent from the DNOs.
Yeah, absolutely. A fourth question is this is probably one of the top 10 most frequently asked questions that comes round every year. It would definitely be in the top 10. So the question is, can you tell me in BS 7671 which regulation gives the permitted distance between a socket outlet and a kitchen sink? So that old chestnut, Craig. What's our thoughts there?
Well, there isn't one. There's no particular regulation within 7671 that gives you a specific distance from a socket outlet and a kitchen sink. There are regulations, 528.3 as an example. It talks about the proximity of electrical services to non-electrical services. and essentially it says it must be located in a position where there's will not cause damage to the electrical services or the converse, so vice versa, so that the electrical service will not damage the non-electrical services. So we talk about suitable spacings, such like that. So there are requirements, or in the Electrical Safety First wiring regulation advisory groups, it does give reference to some information there regarding this as well. A lot of this information that we get from kitchen sinks to sockets and such is probably found in some of the building regulations and the guidance behind between distances from that water source and a socket outlet. But there's nothing in 7671 that states that we shouldn't have a socket that close to a sink.
Absolutely, and we've flashed up on the screen there. So for those that aren't aware, on the Electrical Safety First website, they have two sets of frequently asked questions. Now, these questions are responded to by the Wiring Regulations Advisory Group, which is made up of members from all of the stakeholders in the industry. So you've got ourselves together with other competent person scheme providers. You've got people like the ECA, Select, the IET, Electrical Safety First themselves, BEMA. So all of these bodies get represented in the Wiring Regulations Advisory Group, or often referred to as RAG, and they pose questions and provide industry agreed answers to those. And as I say, there's two sets of those questions freely available on the Electrical Safety First website. One is to do with new and recently installed installations, and one is to do with testing and inspecting of existing installations and also initial verification. And this is one of those questions that's covered, and it says, just exactly what Craig says. There's no distances referenced in BS 7671. BS 7671 does talk about suitable spacing, and it's agreed as an industry, both in the Electrician's Guide to the Wiring Regs, which is issued by the IET, and also on the RAG database, that 300 mil from the edge of the bowl of the sink it is seen as a suitable spacing, not to provide a hazard between the person using the sink and that accessory. Okay, keep the questions coming into the chat. We'll now start to try and pick up some of those in the chat. And some of the ones are, we try and make this Monday night session purely technical. So some of the questions that are coming in about the schemes, we will leave to another time. So we'll try and just cover, or we do try and just cover the technical aspects with this one. So people have asked some questions about the NIC approved contractor scheme. We're not going to cover that tonight. Some people have got the 4 mil answer that we had earlier, which is really good. So some of the things I can see is a good one that will perhaps take us all the way back to college. One of the engineers has posted how swapping L2 and L3 reverses a motor. Well, that's we're talking about a 3-phase AC motor there, and how swapping 2 of the phases reverses it, and it's all to do with the motor creating that rotating magnetic field within the motor, and therefore by if we talk about it going L1, L2, L3, if we swap 2 and 3, you can now see that round that motor it now goes 1, 3, 2, which is effectively reverse. So that's how it's done. And if you pick up any good AC theory books, that will show you that it does work, and it always works. And I can vouch, I've physically had to do it on many occasions. Back in automation days when we had jams, it was sometimes the easiest way would be to reverse the motor. So yes, swapping any two phases on a three-phase motor will change the direction of rotation, and it is as simple as that. If you think of L1, L2 as 3 as the normal, now switch any two of them around, and you'll find that sequence will actually go in reverse.
If you picture the L1 and L2 and L3 as a triangle, and it goes from L1 to L2 to L3. If you swap them the other way around, it's still going to go from L2 to L3, but now in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So that's how my brain sort of has always thought about the reversing of motors in relation to L1, L2, and L3.
No, it's a good way of putting it, because it is those three. But yeah, it's one of those ones that you always think, how can something so simple make such a drastic difference? But that's the way it is. You know, you're creating that rotating magnetic field, and by reversing any two of the phases, you're reversing the direction of that rotation. Commercial EV charging, if the site has its own LV transformer, would an open device still be required? So my answer there would be, we only require an open device if we've got a PME supply. So it would not specifically depend on whether it was a DNO, a public transformer, or whether it was a private. It's more to do with the supply characteristics that you're being fed with, and the potential to lose that, if you are using a PEN conductor, to lose that PEN conductor. So yeah, it doesn't really depend on whether it's a private or a DNO transformer. It's more dependent upon what type of supply are you being provided with, and if it's PME, in order to comply with section 722 of 7671, you would need to have an open device of one of the agreed types. What else have we got coming through? EV charging points. It seems no one is bothering to install bonding. Correct consumer unit, i.e. putting 10mm tails in, only one double pole RCBO, no main switch or surge protection. How are people getting away with it, or am I missing something? Same with solar PV. So yeah, we are required, you know, within Part 7, there are certain sections which require the use of double pole RCBOs. So yeah, you would be quite right that they're required in those instances. Surge protection, not a regulatory requirement just because it's an EV charging point, but may fall under the ident, which talks about financial loss, because obviously that could be a result of a transient overvoltage, could do damage to the vehicle itself. So it would need to be considered and spoken to, whether surge protection was required, or whether the owner or the responsible person for the installation felt it was a tolerable risk. 10mm bonding, really then dependent upon 10mm I would normally associate with PME, because of the requirements for the size of the incoming neutral. So yeah, you know, all of those things certainly have to be considered. Without knowing the detail of your supply and the installation, we can't confirm it would need to be 10mm, but generally on a single phase PME supply, that's what you'd be looking at. So
this
yeah,
is where part 3 is so important, you know, assessment of the general characteristics. It's so important for people to look at the jobs before they start them when it comes to, you know, installing a new EV charger or solar, because part of part 3 is that you verify that the earthing and bonding is adequate. You know, it's one of our fundamental principles as well. So, you know, following the requirements of part 3 means that you will be verifying that, you know, when you look at a job, that you're actually making sure that what you're doing is going to have no less of a does not give rise to any further danger within the installation.
yeah, absolutely. So there's a few people adding their comments about the 300mm. So sockets and sinks are in the building regs. Yeah, there's guidance.
I just wanted to add something in the building regs.
Oh, sorry.
It does state in there that it's kitchen sinks and draining boards in the on-site and the electrician's guide to the building regs. Just notice that on my copy here.
Yeah, but because we believe that there's less danger with the draining board. Agreed. Because there won't be water pooling. So that's designed so that the water should leave. So that's why both ourselves and the industry guidance in RAG on electrical safety first talk about the bowl of the sink.
Which I'm in total agreement with. I probably should have explained that. That's probably where I see some of the confusion when we're out on assessments as well, and that's why there is a difference between them. And the dropping of equipment into the body of water is significantly more dangerous than having a splash from the draining board.
Yeah. And somebody asking about surely kitchen sink is classed as zone 0, so a minimum distance should supply. It's not actually a zone. We only associate zones with baths, showers and swimming pools because of people's immersion and being unclothed and body wet, whereas sink, it generally is just going to be their hands or arms, so seen as less of a risk. So there aren't actually zones associated with a sink. Someone's commenting that in bits of Liverpool the phase rotation is wrong. It's 3-2-1 rather than 1-2-3. Yeah, again, something that I've experienced when we've gone and the incoming phase rotation is round the wrong way. It's not really an issue so long as it's documented and recorded, because the last thing you want to do is go around changing everything on site. So long as it's recorded and it's clear then at every interface to that 3-phase supply that is the actual rotation, it shouldn't create an issue. But yeah, I've come across it as well where it's been wrong at the intake. Can you give guidance on a recent question I've been asked? The commercial installation in question has surge protection at the main incomer and lightning protection as well. So we would normally expect those two to go together. So if you've got lightning protection, then you would definitely need surge protection at the incoming. The engineer then goes on to explain that the installation has a dual supply, both protected by SPDs with on-site auto changeover generator. Is further SPDs required for distribution boards within floors in the premises? This has been highlighted as a requirement. Can you please advise? So the installation has a dual supply, both protected by SPDs with on-site auto change generator. So I'm reading that as the generator is then an alternative to the dual supplies. You've got dual supplies presumably because you've got a higher demand, and then you've got an auto changeover presumably because you've got some critical items of plant that need to continue to be energised even when there's a DNO failure. So is further SPDs required for distribution boards within floors in the premises? This has been highlighted as a requirement. I think my thoughts there would be you'd need to look at what are you actually protecting. Obviously the type 1 SPDs at the origin would be associated with the lightning protection, but they won't adequately protect the whole installation in terms of all transient overvoltage. So effectively it'll, in layman's terms, it'll stop the big transient overvoltage at the origin, but there will be small let through, so to speak. So you may then need further type 2s at distribution boards if you've got critical plant that you again want to protect. I'd always advise speaking to your preferred SPD manufacturer about ensuring that you've got adequate protection throughout the installation, because obviously those type 1s will only protect the origin, and then there's a consideration then for anything beyond that initial zone, which 7671 talks about a 10 metre radius from that intake. then may need further protection because the let through transient over voltage could re-attenuate and spike further within the installation. So I would talk to your preferred SPD manufacturer about how much, but also talk to the client about, okay, you've protected anything coming in on the incoming supply, but now you need to think about what's internal. Could transient over voltages be created by switching supplies inside, and also what do you want to protect to ensure that it maintains its energy and its function in the event of an over voltage due to lightning. Anything you'd add on that, Craig?
I think that's pretty well explained there, Sam.
Okay, so we then get another one. A designer, so this is a different engineer asking a different question, although they're SPDs, so they're not necessarily related. A designer has said type 2 SPD at the distribution board in a flat, but I say type 1 or 2 as the flat complex has lightning protection system. Who's right? Well, if you've got a lightning protection system, it should be a type 1, but it depends. That may be resolved externally from the flat, so that's something I'd say. Definitely there should be a type 1 within the installation because you've got a lightning protection system. But if there is a type 1, then and you've got a distributed system around, let's say, a block of flats, then if that type 1 is at the intake, then you would only need a type 2 at the distribution board. You wouldn't need a type 1 and 2. So that would be the response there, to do a bit of investigation and find out what's at the intake. A few comments about, in my experience, a lot of electrical contractors don't understand phase rotation checks when undertaking new three-phase work in factories and the like. This should be a basic check before work commences, certainly, and certainly where you've got three-phase equipment. Do you think ident 2 for SPD devices was put in for manufacturers to milk it, and why has this now been removed? Well, we know it's been removed because the investigation work that got carried out after Amendment 2 was published shows that if you install your fire detection and alarm system, if you design it and install it in accordance with BS 5839, then that means that the equipment that you select will have the required transient over voltage built in. So that's why ident 2 has been removed, and the comments about using alarm panels as a good example of equipment that needs it because of the category, the impulse category that is maintained. So that was really, it was an error, and the unintended consequences of that error was that people were saying, okay, well, we've got a budget and a plan to do a fire detection and alarm system upgrade in all our housing stock, but we hadn't included for the additions of surge protection devices in all those properties as well. And people were coming to us explaining that they're going to shelve those projects, and it was ludicrous really, because in terms of the fire service and the government published some documentation that said you were 8 times likely to suffer from a fire if you didn't have fire detection and alarm system. So we were always behind installing those, upgrading, enhancing the existing ones. So that was why a lot of the work and investigatory work around what the unintended consequences of Amendment 2 was, and that's why it's been removed. So yeah, it really is the fact that so long as you design and install to 5839 and you select appropriate equipment, you'll already have that the right category of impulse protection built into the equipment. Another engineer's added, I think following on from the dual supply one, regarding dual supplies, do these need to be electrically separate? If so, would you still interconnect the earths? This is a question that we get a lot. So let's take the scenario of an industrial unit that was originally 2 industrial units, gets knocked into one. So now there are 2 separate supplies, perhaps one at each end of the 2 buildings. The requirements are, if you're using ADS, you've got to create a single equipotential zone. So if you've got 2 separate supplies and people within that building can simultaneously access items of equipment that are connected to the 2 separate earths, then that could create a potential voltage difference. So that's when we have to ensure that we connect the earths together. So that therefore creates a single equipotential zone, and we remove that potential for somebody simultaneously accessible to those 2 different earthing arrangements feeling a potential difference. So yeah, you should do that where you've got 2 separate supplies. It's also worth talking to the DNO because those 2 separate supplies may come from the same transformer, and so they're earthed there. But our advice is generally to just go ahead and link the 2 main earth terminals with an earth that's the largest size required by either supply. Something that you come across fairly regularly, Craig?
It happens occasionally when, as the example you gave there, is where you've got a building that's been 2 original units maybe sold off or independently rented by the same firm, and they knock through a wall and all of a sudden they've got more than 1 supply within a building. A lot of these sometimes happen to be metal frame buildings as well. So coincidentally, although not particularly something we see very often, but they're coincidentally connected together through the bonding of the steel framework sometimes. So that sometimes happens, yeah. Yeah, it does happen quite often, but we talk about the dangers of different earthing potentials between those 2 earthing systems, and it can cause significant electric shock risk if they're not connected together.
Yeah, because they could be from 2 different external supplies, and so therefore, even though they might be the same earthing arrangement, maybe both TNS or both TNCS, it doesn't necessarily mean that the earths will be at the same potential. And then of course anybody touching those 2, if they're simultaneously accessible, is going to be the conductor between that potential difference. Okay, I think we're a little bit quiet on the chat. There is one. So yeah, I think it's just again talking about the dual supplies. So yeah, we'll wrap it up with one that's been hanging around again for a while. So what code would we give cables not adequately supported to prevent premature collapse in a defined escape route? So premature collapse or potential premature collapse in a defined escape route. Craig, what's that? Thoughts?
It's quite an easy one. That one's a C2 all day long. Now, it has the potential to be dangerous in the event of a fire or those cables coming loose. In the event of an evacuation, people are going to get entrapped or entangled, and 521.10.202 states that our wiring systems in general should be supported such that they will not be liable to premature collapse in a fire. But when we look at the information found in protected escape routes, is that's a route of access and egress out of a building for either firefighting activities or you getting out of that building. None of us want those cables to drop down and entangle us. So Best Practice Guide 4, which is freely available on the Electrical Safety First Council's Electrical Safety First website. It's issue 6 at the moment. It's a lovely document. It's really handy for people to utilise when they're looking at conducting EICRs and giving industry guidance in relation to the coding, it is stated in there that C2 is an appropriate code for that particular installation and circumstance.
Yeah, and a mention there to Best Practice Guide 4. Again, that's contributed to by all of the stakeholders in the industry, so it is seen as industry guidance. It's very good when, you know, if you as the inspector are being questioned, then you can use it to back up your recommendations, and you've only got to look at the inside cover to see again the organisations within the electrical industry that contribute to that document. So yeah, really superb. Again, freely available to download from the Electrical Safety First website if you haven't got one already. It's they do a range of best practice guides, but that's by far their most popular one. Okay, a few other things to tell you about. We've also got a pocket guide, so if you haven't downloaded our pocket guide from the NIC website, that's something that you can do free of charge. Got some very useful calculations and guidance there. So when we're looking at maximum ZS's of all the common protective devices, when you've estimated a cable run and you're measuring resistance values, you know, do you want to do a check against resistance per meter? One of the functions of the app will help you with that. So if you haven't already downloaded the Pocket Guide app, please do so. And
it's got a nice link to the Electrical Safety First Best Practice Guides as well on there. It's also got a lovely link to our webinars, which I'm pretty sure Sam was probably just about to move on to in relation to upcoming webinars and webinars on demand as well.
Yeah,
really fantastic app that I speak to about with a lot of contractors, and 100% of them are really happy with the content of that app and how beneficial it is for them when they're out in the real world, because it's a pocket guide. It's in your pocket, it's on your phone, it's there available. And yeah, every contractor I see is really happy with it. So that's the big thumbs up to our development team for that as well.
Yeah, no, it was really good and was award winning when it was launched. So really positive, and great work from Craig. He's set up for the next one. So we've got the next in our series of wire webinars coming along next week. So that's Wednesday the 12th of July at 8 p.m. The topic is fundamentals of electrical energy storage, something that we're seeing booming at the moment, not just in association with solar PV systems, but often in the standalone environment. You know, we're seeing people that have got shall we say not a robust supply, or we're seeing people that are taking advantage of cheap rate electricity and installing an energy storage system to take advantage of that. So really good. Okay, once again, we always do this. We run out of time. So before we go, I just want to say thank you. While we're out and about, please do keep in touch via social media. Lots of platforms out there that we post information out, asking questions of the week, and giving you opportunities to respond and ask us questions. So via Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all really good. If you've not done already, please do sign up for the Wire webinar, and also there are 50 other editions or over 50 editions of the Wire that you could look back on in the past. Again, freely available. Great CPD, which is a requirement for us all now, because in this sort of ever-changing world, we do need to keep ourselves up to date. Yeah, please do keep in touch. We'll be back with another Monday night in August. What we're doing at the moment is we're aiming for the first Monday of every month. We'll run one of these Monday night Q&As. So thank you very much if you did put your questions in tonight. Hopefully we gave you some good answers. if we unfortunately didn't get round to your question, then those are the ones that we'll store up and we'll either push out as a social media question during the week, or we'll save them for the next Q&A, which in this instance will be Monday the 7th of August. So any final thoughts and words on that, Craig?
Just don't forget to record your CPD. Please, we've got a record sheet for you guys to fill in, ready for your assessment, because we always ask for it. What CPD have you been doing and how you're recording it? And it doesn't have to be formalised, doesn't have to be the webinars, but they are fantastic. These are not formalised. You don't get a certificate for the Monday night Q&A, but you could have learnt something today. So don't forget to record that on your CPD record.
Yeah,
I'll be looking out for them when I come and see you guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it's we have to do CPD as well, don't we, Craig? So it's quite interesting that I always think at the week, oh yeah, I must remember to record, and then Friday I look back at, okay, well what did I do? And yeah, just keep a running tally, because yeah, it's not just formal classroom. Of course, they're brilliant, but as Craig says, things like this Monday night Q&A, watching The Wire, reading the articles in Connections, just having a technical discussion with somebody, that goes down as CPD. So if you're talking to your colleagues or other engineers during your lunch break, then that can often be put down as a technical discussion, and all contributes towards CPD. It's an industry where you can never say you've got it all now. You've got every qualification, you've read every book, you've done everything, because there'll be another one coming along. It's super quick, and it's continuing to develop, which is great for us, with that inquisitive gene that we want to know. Oh, what's that? I've not seen one of them before. How does that work? How do you install that? What's the advantages? So yeah, keep learning. The old phrase of every day's a school day is absolutely true. Absolutely true. Okay, well, thanks very much for supporting us tonight, Craig, and thanks everybody out there for taking part. Please do look out for us next month, first Monday of the month, every month now, from now till the end of the year. And if you've got any questions, then post them through to us through the social media channels, and we'll use those at the start of the next one, while people are warming themselves up and posting into the chat. Okay, thanks very much, Craig, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Sam. Take care.